Welcome to Athletes to Entrepreneurs, the Alumni Journey. I'm Rob Finkelstein, founder and CEO of Alumni Direct, where we've created a centralized platform for athletes and other alumni to network and connect within their affinity groups. They can also tap into various resources into career education, mental health, financial literacy. But this show is all about, we interview former collegiate and professional athletes, and we talk about their journey, their transition out of sports, ultimately into successful business leadership and entrepreneurship. Today, we're so excited to have Brett Portera. How you doing, Brett?
I'm doing well, Rob. How are you?
I'm doing great, thanks. So Brett, it's going to be an interesting story because we're going to go into several different sports, but his background in college, he went to Bentley and then Rollins, and he was a lacrosse player. Unfortunately, battled a lot of injuries, and I'll tell you more about it. He's still playing today and making that shot at the professional level. He also was an avid surfer, which is going to lead into what he does now. When he got out, he got his MBA at Rollins, and he was also coaching there at Lacrosse, and then ultimately helped his father build a successful janitorial business. And then today, he is the co-founder and CEO of Crest Surf Clubs, which is a really exciting concept. Can't wait for Brett to tell you more about it. But let's get started, Brett. When you were growing up, talk about how sports shaped you leading up into college.
Yeah, so my parents were awesome, and they exposed us to everything, and they kind of let us decide on what we wanted to play and kind of do, throughout our lives. I mean, there were some things like they wanted us to be well-rounded, so I took music classes at some point and played a couple different instruments, and always did well in school. That was always the main focal point, and kind of a lot of my coaches harped on that. If you didn't have good grades, it didn't matter how good you were, for the most part. Grades what got you into school and what would get you a job after and look after you. But from a sports perspective, like I said, I grew up playing everything from soccer, football, baseball, basketball, hockey, lacrosse, pretty much every organized sport there was, and unorganized sports with my friends. And I learned a lot, and a lot of it kind of stemmed from, the hard work and effort and not giving up and not quitting. And then also like how to work with teams, how to become a leader. I mean, I think I owe kind of everything to sports, in my opinion. And whether that's what I personally learned or kind of the habits that I picked up or kind of the things that were instilled on me by coaches or even my parents. Like one of the things that really comes to mind is that my parents wouldn't let us quit. We could quit after their season, but we could never quit like in season. So like there became a time where baseball was not for me and I wanted to play lacrosse, and I had been signed up for both. And, probably not even halfway through the baseball season, I was like, I'm over this. I just want to play lacrosse. And they're like, that's fine, but you have to finish the season out because you started it. And I think like that lesson right there of just kind of sticking with something and not quitting till the job's done is something that's been very impactful on me, especially as an entrepreneur, because life's not easy when you're trying to start your own business, and there's plenty of times where you do want to give up and just quit, but I've been conditioned to this point to do my best to stick it through and see it out, and kind of have definitely pulled that from sports.
Yeah, I'll tell you what, that's a great lesson. I mean, I think it's great that your parents instilled it. I was always the same way. You got to see it through, at least see the season through. So that's good advice to athletes out there, and especially in this journey to entrepreneurship. As being an entrepreneur myself, I can attest to that. There's a lot of hard work and effort, a lot of ups and downs, and you got to stick to it if you want to make it successful. So, did you dream about being an athlete growing up, and if so, what sport? Like a professional athlete?
I don't know. I think maybe like on the football side of things, like I always wanted to be a quarterback. I was never a quarterback. I was a tight end. I was not athletic enough or had a strong enough arm, but I was a big body, and I was athletic enough that I could catch and I could block. So I kind of found my way there. So I think at some point, like I probably wanted to be an NFL quarterback, like probably the majority of kids do. But that's really the only place. Like I knew from an early age, like lacrosse was not really a career path, because at the time it was basically a glorified summer league that you got paid a couple $100 a game for, and it was nothing really to strive for, I guess. Not to take anything away from the guys that play professionally, It's come a long way since then. But yeah, I was never like, I'm going to be a professional lacrosse player or something like that for the most part. So
Yeah, I always joke around. I want to be a Major League Baseball player, and unfortunately, the talent wasn't there. So I do podcasts. I do podcasts, and I'm an entrepreneur. But let's talk about transition is such a major issue today. Whether it's financial literacy, mental health for athletes, and so when you were in school, were there, I guess, like classes or workshops, and not just like the one day thing, but a means of education for both the current athletes there at Rollins as well as alumni athletes about your I guess your path after sports.
So I don't remember there being anything really dedicated to that. I'm a little bit older. I've been out of school since 2018. I finished my undergrad, so I would think that now they have implemented some stuff there, because I know Rollins is pretty, tries to help their athletes as much as possible and is very big on mental health and things like that. So it wouldn't surprise me if they had something there now. The only thing I can kind of point to is that specifically for the business school, at least, because that was the part of the school that I was in, they did do their best to try and set kids up post graduation from that perspective, which I think is a piece of that transition. It's not all of it, but having the ability to kind of go into a job or at least actively applying for things like that, I think that does help. But there definitely is a big piece of it that I wasn't educated on, mental health wise and all the other stuff that you'd mentioned. So.
Yeah, I think you're right. I think more. I was graduated a lot earlier than you, but and stuff didn't exist back then. But I think it's you're right. The schools are making more of an effort, but I think it's important. We've talked about potentially going into universities and trying to help develop additional curriculum with a team of resources. In that space, the mental health, financial, career services, sales, whatever it might be, but not only for the current athletes, but for the alumni athletes as well. So let's talk about networking and connecting. And, this is something that's obviously important to us at Alumni Direct. Talk about, doing it while you're still playing.
Yeah. So networking is always something that I've struggled with, because I've always been a little bit, I guess, shy or reserved a bit more. So it's definitely not my strong point. I'm doing my best to get better at it. So at Rollins, the lacrosse program specifically was a younger program on campus. So I think when I was there, we were like somewhere in the range of like 8 to 12 years. And I actually ended up transferring in. So I didn't know a ton of the older guys, because, the only class that I knew ahead of me was the one that was a year older than me. I came in as a junior. But with that being said, we did have a lot of alumni coming back. It was definitely a very connected community. I mean, if you don't know where Rollins is and never been there, it's in a town called Winter Park in outside of Orlando, Florida, and it's beautiful. Like my parents were probably more upset when we graduated than we were, because they couldn't come down to visit us anymore. So it's definitely a big draw on alumni, and Rollins does a really good job of having alumni come back, whether it be for alumni day or like the alumni game. Every sport has an alumni game. Ours kind of wound up being when it was Parents Weekend. Other sports were in the spring when we had the official alumni day. They brought in guest speakers, specifically athletically. A lot of people come back and try to help networking there. They have a really strong network in the Central Florida community as well that they kind of tap into, and they try to get kids jobs that way, because it's right in their backyard. But it is a very national network too. I know there's chapters like in New York, for example, and Chicago and things of that nature. It's just a matter of kind of getting in tune with them. But I think I would give Rollins like a pretty high score there in terms of giving athletes access to that and having a alumni base that actually wants to be part of it. Because I think that's the more important piece, and the bigger piece there is like you actually have to have alumni that want to give back and come back. And I think there's a really strong sense of that at Rollins.
Yeah, that's great. And I think, you're kind of living it the same way I was. Like I went to Delaware, and being in South Florida, you're so far away from it. So now that you're, you mentioned like a New York chapter. So, I mean, is there like a real, I mean, obviously it's the alumni want to, need to, or want to go back and go to these events and stuff like that. But do they do stuff in your area there in New York, like different types of events throughout the year?
I believe they do. I haven't gotten involved in any of that yet. To be honest, I've been so busy on everything that I'm doing that I don't have a ton of free time. It's something that I'd like to do in the future, especially like once I have Crest up and going and I in a position where I can, potentially hire other Rollins graduates and can offer internships and things like that. I don't know how much value I add currently. But my understanding is that I believe the president of the college does kind of like a countrywide tour where he'll show up at a couple of these events throughout the year. And I think there's other events, I don't know how many they do, but they definitely do some things in New York and as well as in other places where they have these chapters.
Did you, like you mentioned, you kind of tapped on a little bit, but like back to like the athlete side then. So, athletes are coming back, like you said, for like, homecoming games and things like that. Do they have any type of a mentoring program there where like they would say, hey, Brett, can you come back and like work with some of the lacrosse athletes or maybe some of the baseball players, whatever it might be?
At the time, they didn't. When I went to the grad school on campus, they did have a mentoring program, but that was a much smaller group, and it wasn't necessarily geared towards athletes. So like Disney's right in our backyard there, right? So I know that if you applied for the mentoring program, you had the potential of getting like some of the Disney execs and things of that nature. So it was being done on a kind of, I guess, a more reserved level at the time when I was there.
Okay.
I'm not sure if they've kind of, I could be wrong. They might have something for athletes. Like I said, I was really only there for 2 years undergrad, so it might have been something that I missed out on. But to my knowledge, I don't think there was anything at the time.
And it's even more like today, like if they're like reaching out to you. I mean, I was on a call, with my university, and we were talking about with the athletic department, just talking about the mentoring programs and bringing people back. One of our former like Hall of Fame football players from there, and played in the NFL and all that, was like, hey, tap me in. I'm willing to help out. And I'm sure, like you said, I went, as you go along, because I mean, you've got a lot. Everybody's got a lot to offer. I mean, I try to approach networking, connecting with just kind of the helping mentality, because I think a lot of time, even if somebody's like super successful, it'd be like, okay, well, what do I have to offer them? Well, you never know. It might be something like in your case, you might have a super uber successful alumni or just someone else that you connect with, and their kid loves surfing. Mm-hmm. And all of a sudden it's like, wow, okay, like Brett's got this awesome facility. Let me become a member. So you never know where that goes. And it just, we encourage people to, tap into, I always say, even if you go back to high school, I mean, if you think about like your friends and their parents and just coaches and stuff like that, there's people want to help. So we encourage people to network and connect. So let's talk a little bit about NIL, name, image, likeness, and a little bit of a controversial topic. I mean, there's a lot of different factions of it. I mean, you can be looking at the whole portal thing and all that, but give me your thoughts, positive and negative. I know it wasn't around when you were playing, but now even, you're seeing like lacrosse athletes and track athletes, like other sports are getting opportunities in NIL.
No, I think it's great. If I remember correctly, when I was in school, when there was no NIL, I don't even think I could legally like run a session of coaching by myself. I'm pretty sure. I think that was kind of against NCAA rules, which I didn't pay attention to. That's BS in my opinion. But, I'm a college kid. I need to make money somehow. That's like my main kind of tool that I can use to make money, and it's like it's not hurting anybody. I'm not taking it like I'm giving a lesson to a kid. So I think it's a positive thing. I think like little stuff like that should never have been outlawed. Who are you to tell me that I can't basically run my own business? In my opinion, I think the negatives of NIL are just kind of what we're seeing at it's really concentrated into D1 football and basketball, is from what I can tell, right? Where you have like this whole transfer portal thing that's going on, and how kids won't even go and take a visit on campus unless they get like 10 grand or something ridiculous, whatever it's going on. Like that stuff's a bit ridiculous. Like I get everybody needs to make money, and they all have their own personal brands, and like I get all that, but like at the end of the day, you're not how many of those kids are actually going to be professional players? And like, I think they need to take a step back and like, kind of be like, okay, I need to go to a school that is going to set me up for the future too, and kind of take a lot of that into consideration, and not just who throws the biggest check at them. Because, when you're 18 years old and you sign a multi-million-dollar deal, like, okay, who's managing that money? Where is it going? Because odds are you don't know what to do with it, and you're going to blow it, and then you're going to graduate, and you're going to have either gotten hurt or not made it. And now what do you do? Because you kind of, you know, banked on just taking the money you got in college, and you might not be able to know what to do when you get out because that was your focus, right? So I think there's a lot. I think there's a lot more good than bad, but I think the bad is very amplified,
Right.
especially like under those two microscopes. Like I said, I don't know enough about other sports and like how they're getting an NIL. I mean, from I've seen on the lacrosse side, it's not really money. The guys are getting, they're just getting access to gear and
Right.
clothing and things like that. So
Yeah, it's interesting. I mean, I mentioned we're talking offline. I have another podcast called NIL for You, and one of the key components there you mentioned, like with the negative, is just there's more need for education. And I know one thing is, where we've talked about how it's giving from a positive perspective, giving the athlete a chance to almost like setting up their own business, and like paying the taxes, everything they need to learn about building a business and becoming an entrepreneur, and then that exposure to some of these brands that could ultimately lead to potentially jobs or just different things like when they are done in school. So we definitely see that. So one of the I kind of added this in each week. It's my little wrinkle, my couple questions that I ask. Somebody had suggested it. It's been fun. What advice would you give to freshman Brett?
um, I would take it back another step and go back to high school senior Brett that had applied to 24 different schools and had no idea where he was going to go. And the advice would be go to Rollins to start. Don't transfer. That's where you should be. And then freshman Brett, there's a lot. Like if I knew what I know now, just from a pure athletic standpoint, like I think my college career would have been very different. Like just how I approached health and the effort that I put in. Like I'm in better shape now at 28 than I was at 18. I think. Well, no, I was in good shape at 18, but 19, 20, and 21, I'm in better shape now and in a better position than I was then. And there's a couple different factors that went into that, but it all kind of just comes down to the fact that I think I got distracted my freshman year and never really recovered from that in terms of like I took my eye off the prize from an athletic standpoint. I still did well in school, and obviously that's the most important thing. But athletically, it would have been just kind of keep my head down a little bit longer and put the work in, and it would have paid off a lot more. But.
Gotcha. Now fast forward. What advice would you give to senior Brett?
Enjoy it while it lasts, because the real world is not nearly as fun as college is.
That's a good one. So, all right, let's talk about transition out of sports, and we talked before, and you're saying that you're still going at it with lacrosse, and with the goal ultimately. I know this. You were saying there's some different things going on with professional leagues and ones that didn't last long, but talk about your transition out of college sports. So you were all through growing up, and when you started focusing on lacrosse, now all of a sudden it's kind of in a sense done, at least from a college perspective. How was that for you, transitioning out of that into getting your MBA and getting into like somewhat of the work world?
Yeah, so in college, I had 2 years where I probably should have taken medical red shirts. So the summer going into my sophomore year, I ended up getting sick with something called reactive arthritis. Basically, like shut down my joints. I went from like 220 pounds. I was a little fat at the time, down to like 195 pounds in the course of like a couple weeks, and
Wow.
then took me probably about a year to a year and a half to kind of like fully recover from that. But I didn't. I only missed like a couple weeks in the fall of fall ball, basically, which was a bad idea. I should have just sat out the whole season. Like no matter how much work I put in, I was never going to be in shape for the spring, and I basically burned a year. I didn't learn from my mistake. I ended up doing the same thing my senior year. So ultimately, I did not play a lot in college, which I'm a very competitive person. And so I never really like got my fix and got that out of my system. Like a lot of people after college if they don't go play professionally, they're just burnt. Like they're just done. They did it for whatever it is, 18 years of their life, 15 years of their lives. They probably played that sport and they just kind of had enough. They have other things to focus on. And for me, like it's always been at my back nagging me because I know that I could have been so much better than I was. And like, I still have fuel in my tank. So that's been really tough for me. Like just being able to kind of deal with that. And like, I work a lot and I do focus on that. And I've transitioned to using lacrosse as kind of like an escape for me and training as an escape for me. I'm still trying to play. So I'm a dual Italian-American citizen. So I've been getting involved with Italian lacrosse over the last couple of years, which has been great because, lacrosse is not really a worldwide sport like baseball or basketball or soccer. It's getting there. We just got inclusion into the Olympics for 2028 in LA for the first time. So hopefully that goes well and it continues to grow. But the guys in Italy are awesome. They're really appreciative of when we come over there and we help them. And that's been very good for me, like being able to help there. And also, having the opportunity to play with them at that level, although, it's not professional, but it's definitely, somewhere I would like to play at that level. So we'll see what happens there. But, to be honest, it's definitely been tough. But I think the fact that I have a business to kind of put a lot of that effort and that same competitive fireness into has been really helpful for me.
That's great. So we're looking for 2028 Team Italy. We're going to see Brett in the Olympics.
I don't know. I might be too old at that point. I think my goal at the minimum would be on the coaching staff then. But I would be like into my 30s at that point. So it might be a little bit too late for me to play. But I would like to, at the very least, like I said, I'd like to be on that coaching staff. So we'll see what happens.
That's great. So what advice would you give to athletes as they transition in a sport, whether it's collegiately or professionally?
It's a little bit different for everybody. So like, I can't speak to it to the professional level. But from what I've seen, like on the college level, like half of you are going to be really burnt out and you're never going to want to play that sport again. Like I'm going through that with some of my friends right now who are a couple years younger than me, my age, a couple years older. Like it's a mixed bag. Some guys don't want to play anymore and some guys still do want to play. So it's kind of just depends on how your life went and how your college career went. And if you're just done, you're done. Like kudos to you. I think that's easy. I think that's easier for sure. But if you're not done, I think that's where it's tougher. It's just, depending on where you live, having access to play. Like, so I live on Long Island and Long Island has a great summer lacrosse league because all the college kids come home. But the rest of the year, there's nothing really for someone who's between the ages of 21 and 32. It's all like senior master level. So like, that's tough as far as dealing with that transition. So I think being able to find somewhere that you can play if you still want to play is important, but also find something else to do. So like I just started doing Orange Theory because it's competitive. It's not like super competitive like the sport is, but like, because it's me and a lot of housewives for the most part, to be honest. But I can still compete to some extent. So that's been helpful for me. But I think also just having the right people around you and then like having a job that you can kind of approach the same way that you approach your sport. So like, having the competitiveness to want to excel at your job too is a good way to transition because that's going to set you up for later in life as well. If, you continue to put that hard work in, you're putting it in, maybe in a jacket and tie rather than in the weight room, but you're still, taking all the things that you learned, you're applying it to kind of your new path and goal in life. And I think that's really important. Yeah,
no, and that's great advice. And I think a lot of athletes don't realize just that when we talk about it, the athlete skill set, the DNA, just all the things you kind of just touched on, the leadership, the competitiveness, the team efforts, and all that. Just sometimes people identify themselves. Okay, I'm Brett the lacrosse player, Rob the runner, Susie the swimmer, Bill the soccer player, whatever. But they think of themselves at the sport, and they're not. And so we encourage athletes that just when your time in sports is up, it doesn't mean life ends. You got a whole life ahead of you and a lot of many years, and use that skill set. A lot of people want to hire athletes, because of that skill set. And then, so which kind of leads me to talk about your journey into entrepreneurship. And you kind of touched on it in the beginning, but talk a little more about how your athlete skill set translates into, where you are today.
Yeah, so it's a little bit of a blurred line for me because I grew up in an entrepreneurial household. So my dad had me working at his place when I was like around probably 10 in the summers, like a day a week for, it was probably like $1 an hour. I started out at just kind of there. Um, so I saw how him and my mom were living and kind of, what went into running your own business at a very young age. And then that kind of coincided with what I was learning from the sports side of things, being a leader, working with teams, not giving up, all that stuff. And very quickly saw like that direct correlation kind of. Um, so I think that, it's tough to really say like, okay, I learned this from sports or I learned this from what I saw. I think just the fact that I had both growing up is really what ultimately pushed me in the direction that I went, and like wanting to be a leader on and off the field, kind of, inspiring me to, be my own boss, and then also kind of seeing how my parents were living and the lifestyle they had, and kind of went into it from that perspective. So
No, that's good. I mean, I think it's a good lesson. Just people need to, you know, look at what they have. I mean, I remember one time we had a guy played college football, one of our podcast guests, and he just talked about how ultimately he got in the business world, and he was the CEO of a couple big, large companies before he retired. But he talked about that whole athlete skill set, and that's kind of what led him there. So let's talk Crest Surf Clubs. Talk a little bit about your, kind of what led you there. I mean, we've talked offline, but talk a little about your love for surfing and how it got you there, and then all about the business.
sure. So like I said, I played like the majority of sports growing up, organized, unorganized, team, individual, and two of the things that we did, kind of like as hobbies, I guess, were surfing and snowboarding. So I started surfing when I was probably around like 10 years old or so, somewhere like 5, 10, 8, somewhere like that. My dad had grown up surfing, had been surfing since he was 13. So, as soon as he had the opportunity to get me on a board and create an excuse for later in life when when he really wanted to go surf, but he dragged me with him basically. He took that opportunity, I think, and I'm glad he did. As I was growing up, surfing was always my escape from everything, whether it was school or lacrosse or whatever was the issue at the moment, or even not having an issue. Like I always wanted to surf. Right. It's an addictive sport. So as I was getting older and, I got into like middle school, high school, and this idea of having wave pools for surfing or surf parks was kind of becoming a thing, I like became fixated on that. Like that's what I wanted to do. My dad had kind of come up with an initial business idea, which was running one on Long Island as a private club, because just from a dollars and cents standpoint, it made the most sense to do it that way. And he had a background of being a golfer and going to country clubs and kind of knowing how they worked. So he thought it was a very kind of seamless transition there. And then as I got into college, that's when things started to kind of shift. So right before my senior year of high school, we went and we surfed in the wave pool for the first time down in Disney World in Orlando. And that kind of gave everything a kickstart, and then kind of died down a little bit because I was a senior in high school and I had other things to worry about at the time. And then when I got to college, it just became like front and center for me. Everything, all my classes, all my assignments, like were kind of tying back into trying to build this startup business of a surf club, essentially. So for the last, it's been about 8, 9 years now, we've been working on what is now Crest Surf Clubs. So it'll be a private surf club with a wave pool, and then kind of a slew of other amenities around it. Out on Long Island, we have plans to scale it around the country, potentially internationally. See how things go and see how much gray hair I have after the first project is done, because I've earned plenty to date. But basically, our goal is to create a world-class wave and a pool, and really make surfing convenient, because it's not at all. There's a lot of factors that go into surfing, and there's no repetition like other sports. Um, and then also kind of just share that love for surfing and grow the sport in general. Being able to give people somewhere where they can be in a controlled environment, they can get the repetition they need, they can go from beginner to pro, basically in one place, is all kind of under the umbrella of what we're trying to do here. So
that's great. And what? So is it an annual membership? Is it a monthly membership? Like, how does it work?
it's just like a country club or a yacht club. So it's essentially it's an annual membership. You get access to the pool pretty much whenever you want. There's also a 9,000 square foot clubhouse that overlooks the pool, and that'll have everything from locker rooms and board storage and wetsuit storage to a Michelin star food and beverage operator. So you'll have a great meal on site, some co-working space, coaching, a workout area, kind of everything that you would need to one, enjoy your surf session and bring people with you, but also progress as a surfer, because that's a really big piece of it. Like I said before, there's two things you want as a surfer. It's to surf better and surf more. And that's kind of what Crest has been founded on, is being able to give our members access to those two things.
So would your members mostly be, like in this case, in the Long Island area, or you would have people from around the country that might kind of come in and utilize it?
So we've been on sale now for about 18 months. We're almost done with our excavation now. I'm looking to pour concrete, by the summer. Hopefully, potentially sooner. We'll see. But I guess the summer's going to be here in a couple of weeks. So our members have come from all over the place. The majority are coming from the state of New York, Long Island, and New York City. But we do have probably somewhere between like 10 and 20% that have come from out of state, whether it be Connecticut, Jersey, North Carolina. I think we have a member from Hawaii. We have a couple California members. We have a good chunk from Florida. So everybody's been spread out. Not everybody lives here year round. So we do have a pretty big draw, which is why we want to scale this as well, because we know there's other markets outside of New York that will be accommodating.
So it'd almost be kind of like subsidizing too, as far as the amount of surfing that somebody's doing. Like if they want to go on that wonderful trip to like Hawaii or California, or like one of these places you hear the surfers talk about, this is a good training ground for it too.
Yeah, it definitely is. It's not meant to replace the ocean by any means. The problem is, like on Long Island, for example, you have probably like 500,000 surfers or something like that just live here, let alone the people that come when there's waves, because they will come in droves when there are. And there's, I think, 30 like recognized surf spots across Long Island, which you do the math, that's very, very crowded. And then you add in the fact that you need to have the right swell direction, the right wind direction, the right wave height, tides, all these things that kind of go into it. And then you really only get warm water from like June to October. So it's far from a surfer's paradise, and there is really a lack of inventory essentially. So, Crest is meant to subsidize that, and like, okay, you can surf whenever you want. Also makes it convenient, right? Because you're dealing with, the city that never sleeps. So right. These people a lot of them don't have the time to go to the beach for 2 or 3 hours a day or whatever it is, even once a week for that matter, and get like quality surf. So you can tell someone that they can come and they can, surf for an hour at the pool, and they're going to basically get their fill. Like, that's really attractive there. And then also it's creating a sense of community, which is really kind of a key piece here. Right. And from that community, like, fosters so many different things. Surf trips is one of them too. And, the problem with surf trips has been, like, you can spend a lot of money and not get waves, because no matter how advanced surf forecasting is, we've all been on trips, and anybody tells you they haven't is a liar, where, the forecast said one thing, you show up at the beach and there's no waves the entire time you're there, or it's not nearly as good as you thought it was going to be. And it's like, well, I spent all this money and kind of got skunked a little bit. So Crest is really there to kind of bridge that gap. And like I said, make it convenient and give you the repetition that you seek. Because those are really the two things that surfing lacks at this point.
Well, what kind of hours do you run, or will you be running?
We're expecting to run from like 5 a.m. to midnight. So the pool will
Oh,
be
wow.
lighted. It's heated, so it is outdoor, but it's a year-round operation because it's heated and lighted. So yeah, we're here for our members essentially. So they'll ultimately kind of dictate what the hours are, but in our modeling, we're slated to run first session 5-6 o'clock in the morning. Last session ends right around midnight. So, and let me tell you, the late night sessions are probably some of the coolest things, like surfing under the lights, because that's not something that's natural like at all, right? Like
You're not doing that in the ocean.
yeah, that's a really cool and neat thing. That's my favorite times when I've gone to wave pools before. Have been during off hours.
Yeah, I'll tell you what, it sounds awesome. So how can people find you?
Sure, you can find me on LinkedIn, Brett Portera, MBA, or any of the Crest stuff you can get me through. So crestsurfclubs.com is the website. We're on Instagram, Facebook, LinkedIn, and then my personal email is brett@crestsurfclubs.com.
That's great, and it's cool. It's definitely, people need to check this out, and good luck with everything with the grand opening. Hopefully, like you said, towards the end of this year, and then opening up in other markets as well. And you can find us at alumnidirect.com. Subscribe to the show and follow it on our Alumni Direct YouTube channel, as well as all across all the podcast networks. And this is such an important message that we're trying to get across. We really want to help athletes out, and so having great advice from athletes like Brett really helps out. So I encourage people to do it. And thanks again, everybody. It's just another great show.